I booked an Airbnb outside a small town in western Pennsylvania. It was supposed to be a quiet place where I could focus and get away for a bit. The listing showed a one-story house, kind of like a ranch-style home, with trees around it and a gravel driveway. The photos made it seem clean and minimal, plain furniture, hardwood floors, a little deck out back. It wasn't far from a lake, and the description said it was peaceful, with no neighbors in sight. That was what I wanted. No noise, no people, just space. I drove up from Pittsburgh, a little over 2 hours. The highway was fine, but the last 30 minutes were just narrow country roads, twisting through woods, past rundown barns, empty fields. I stopped for gas in town before heading to the house. It was late afternoon when I got there. The sun was low, and the shadows through the trees stretched long across the gravel. I parked in front of the house. It looked exactly like the photos. White siding, green shutters, a porch swing that creaked a little in the breeze. The area around the house was quiet. No other homes close by. I could see the woods behind it stretching out for miles. Self-check-in. The lockbox was easy. I got inside and did a quick walkthrough. It was small, living room, 1 bedroom, kitchen, bathroom. No basement. There were a couple windows without curtains, but everything felt clean. Sparse. The kind of place you'd expect to see if someone was fixing it up slowly but still renting it out in the meantime. There was a heater, a wall unit, and a ceiling fan. The fridge worked, the water ran cold. I unpacked a little and sat on the couch with my laptop, feeling okay about everything. That first night was uneventful. I made some pasta, watched a show on my tablet, then went to bed early. It was dead quiet out there. No cars, no wind, nothing. Just silence. I remember laying in bed and realizing I couldn't even hear insects. I thought maybe it was just the cold keeping them away. I slept straight through. The next morning I made eggs and sat out on the deck with coffee. The view was nice, just trees. No trails. No signs of anyone else around. I wrote for a few hours, went for a short walk down the road, then came back and read a bit. By evening, I noticed the porch light wasn't working. I flicked the switch a few times and nothing happened. I thought maybe the bulb had burned out, so I made a note to mention it in the review. That night, I had a little trouble sleeping. I kept thinking I was hearing something outside, like soft crunching on gravel. Not loud, just movement. I got up around 2 a.m. and looked out the window. It was pitch black, except for some faint moonlight. I stood there for a while, half expecting to see a deer or something, but there was nothing. I told myself it was probably just a raccoon or some kind of animal and went back to bed. Still, I locked the bedroom door, even though I was alone in the house. The next day, something felt different. I went out to the car to get a charger I'd left, and I noticed little pebbles scattered across the hood. Weird, because it hadn't rained, and there weren't any trees directly above the car. I brushed them off and looked around the property, but there was no one. Still quiet, still peaceful. But that unease was in my chest now, a kind of tightness that wouldn't go away. Around noon, I heard a knock. Not on the front door. On the side of the house. Just one knock. Solid. I froze. I waited, heart thudding. I didn't move. I sat at the kitchen table for what felt like 5 minutes, staring at the wall. No footsteps. No voice. Just that knock echoing in my ears. I got up, slowly walked to the side window and peeked through the edge. No one. Nothing. The trees swayed a little, but the gravel and the grass were still. I told myself it could have been a branch or something falling against the siding. I wanted to believe that. I needed to. That evening I triple-checked all the locks. The door. The windows. I even shoved a chair under the knob of the back door. I turned all the lights on, even the ones in rooms I wasn't using. But the porch light still didn't work. At around 11 p.m., I heard something again. This time it wasn't a knock. It was like someone brushing against the siding, a slow drag, like a coat sleeve sliding across wood. I sat there, frozen on the couch, not even breathing. I didn't check. I didn't want to know. I stayed in the living room, lights on, pretending I didn't hear it. Eventually, I forced myself to go to bed. I locked the door again, turned on a white noise app on my phone, and left the light on in the hallway. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I found something that made my stomach drop. On the back deck, near the step, someone had left a small stack of stones. 3 of them, perfectly balanced. And I knew they hadn't been there the day before. I would have seen them. I just stood there, staring at them, heart pounding. They weren't decorative. They weren't there by accident.
Someone had placed them there.
I backed into the house, locked the door behind me, and sat at the table again. My mind was spinning. I knew I hadn't imagined it. That wasn't the kind of thing that just happened. I went over every possibility in my head: kids messing around, a neighbor playing games, the host trying to scare me for fun. But the nearest neighbor was miles off. There was no one. I packed my stuff slowly. I wasn't sure if I was overreacting. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was letting my imagination run wild. But something felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, but wrong, like I was being watched. I hadn't seen anyone, hadn't heard anyone clearly, but I felt it. That pressure. That awareness. I stayed one more night, out of stubbornness, but I didn't sleep. I stayed up with a flashlight and a kitchen knife on the couch, watching the front door, listening. Every creak in the floor, every gust of wind. I jumped at all of it. Nothing happened. Not that night. But the next morning, when I went out to load the car, the stones were gone. Not knocked over.
Gone.
No sign of them. I didn't even go back inside. I left the key in the box, started the car, and drove straight out of there. I skipped breakfast. I didn't stop until I was an hour down the highway. I pulled into a rest stop and sat in the car for a long time. It's been weeks now, and I still don't know what that was. Maybe it was someone who lives off the grid out there. Maybe they don't like people staying on that property. Maybe the host doesn't even know. Maybe someone was using that land before the Airbnb started. All I know is I wasn't alone out there. Someone was close, watching, testing me, maybe, seeing how long I'd stay. I didn't leave a review. I didn't report anything. I just won't ever stay in a place that isolated again. Because if someone wanted to do something, really do something out there, no one would have found me. Not in time. Maybe not ever. I booked a 2-bedroom guest house in Ohio for 5 nights while visiting some family and checking out properties nearby. The listing looked clean and simple. The place was attached to the host's main house but had its own entrance, private garage, and no contact check-in, which I liked. I didn't want to socialize. I just needed a quiet place to sleep, work during the day, and come and go as I pleased. When I arrived, the house looked exactly like the photos. A gray, single-story structure with a small front lawn. The garage was on the side, and my entrance was through a door that led from the garage directly into the guest house. There was a keypad lock, and the code worked fine. Inside, everything smelled freshly cleaned, sheets tucked tight, soft towels in the bathroom, no signs of pets or smoking. I noticed a printed sheet on the table with a Wi-Fi password, trash instructions, and a note that said to park in the garage because it was reserved solely for guest use. The garage itself was empty, just some tools hung neatly on the walls and a recycling bin in the corner. I backed my car in and locked both the garage and the side door that led into the house. There was also a second bedroom I didn't need, so I just closed that door and planned not to use it. The first night passed quietly. I worked on my laptop until about midnight and then went to bed. The room was dark, comfortable. Around 4 a.m., I stirred awake, maybe from a weird dream, maybe just restless. That's when I heard the low rumble of the garage door opening. At first, I didn't react. I was half asleep, and it took a few seconds for my brain to even recognize the sound. I sat up and listened. It stopped, like the door had reached the top. I figured maybe the host had opened it from their side for some reason. Still, it made no sense. The garage was supposed to be mine. It was specifically stated in the listing. I got up and walked through the living room, then slowly opened the interior door that led into the garage. It was dark, so I hit the switch. The overhead light flickered on. Empty. No car. No tools moved. Nothing out of place. But the garage door was now shut. I hadn't heard it close. I checked the side door, the one that led from the garage into the guest unit. It was unlocked. I was positive I had locked it when I got in that night. I remembered because the keypad outside had given me trouble, and I double-checked it out of habit. But now it was open. Not just unlatched, fully turned and unlocked. I locked it again, this time twisting the deadbolt, and went back to bed. My mind tried to come up with some explanation. Maybe it hadn't latched all the way. Maybe I didn't twist it hard enough. I didn't want to overthink it. I needed sleep. The next day I bought a cheap bottle of water at the gas station, drank it, and kept the bottle. That night, I placed a wooden chair under the doorknob of the garage entry door and balanced the empty bottle on top of the knob. It was crude, but I figured if someone tried to open the door again, the bottle would fall and make noise. I also pulled the door tight, locked it, and twisted the deadbolt. Then I tested the setup. Slightly touching the knob made the bottle rattle. Satisfied, I went to bed. At 3:40 a.m., I woke up to that sound again, the slow, grinding clunk of the garage door opening. I felt a rush of heat run through my chest. I sat up fast, eyes wide open now. I listened carefully, barely breathing. The sound stopped. I jumped out of bed and rushed toward the garage door inside the house. I paused right before touching the knob. The bottle was still there, still perfectly upright. But I noticed something. The knob had shifted ever so slightly. It was turned just enough that I could see it wasn't in the exact same position I had left it. Not fully turned, but like someone had tested it. Just enough to disturb the grip of the chair beneath, but not enough to drop the bottle. I opened the door quickly and flicked on the light. The garage was empty again, completely quiet. I scanned the floor for footprints or signs of anyone. Nothing. The garage door was down, like it had shut itself. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I drove to a nearby electronics store and bought a cheap motion-detecting camera. It was meant for baby monitoring or small room security, but it had night vision and could record onto an SD card. I set it up in the garage on the shelf above the recycling bin and angled it to cover the entire garage floor and the entrance door. On my final night, I locked up again. Door bolted, chair under the knob, bottle in place. I even left my bedroom door half open so I could hear better. I lay awake in bed, scrolling through my phone, but mostly listening. At exactly 3:42 a.m., the garage door opened again. This time I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I just lay there, eyes wide, listening for every sound. After about 20 seconds, I heard the faintest creak from the other side of the interior garage door, like someone had lightly tested the handle. No bottle drop. Then silence. I waited another 10 minutes, then got up, camera in hand. I didn't touch the door. I didn't want to scare whoever it was. I just turned off all the lights, grabbed my keys and laptop, and sat on the couch until the sun came up. As soon as it was bright enough, I checked the camera. I scrolled through the footage from the night, and there it was at 3:42 a.m., the garage door opened halfway, then stopped. A figure stepped underneath. A teenage boy. Tall, skinny, wearing a black hoodie and sweatpants. His hood was up, but I could see part of his face when he turned slightly. Pale skin, light-colored hair. He walked in like he knew exactly where he was going. He went up to the door and tested the handle. When it didn't budge, he stood there for maybe 10 seconds, then turned around and walked back out. The door closed behind him. He hadn't looked confused. He hadn't looked lost. He looked like someone who had done it before. I saved the footage to my phone. I thought about confronting the host, but I didn't want to deal with excuses or lies in person. Instead, I packed everything up by 6 a.m., locked the garage, and left. I sat at a diner nearby and messaged the host through the Airbnb app, asking directly, "Do you know who this person is? Someone keeps opening the garage at night." They responded almost immediately. "That's just our son. He's harmless." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Nothing about how this was never mentioned in the listing. No acknowledgement that I had a right to know someone was accessing my private area at night. I was furious. I wrote a detailed review. I explained the events in order, mentioned the video, stated that the garage wasn't private, that a teenage boy had come in multiple times without warning, and that the host admitted to knowing about it. Within an hour, the review disappeared from the listing. When I checked again, The host still had their superhost badge. Dozens of glowing reviews. No mention of anything I'd experienced. It was like my warning had never existed. I still have the footage on my phone. I never posted it. I didn't go public with it. But that whole experience changed the way I book places. I don't stay in ghost houses anymore, especially not ones connected to someone's home. I look for standalone properties only. I bring a camera with me, and I always check every door twice. Because even if you follow the rules, even if the listing looks perfect, there's no way to know who else has access or who might be watching while you sleep. I booked a small apartment in St. Louis for a 5-day work trip. It was an Airbnb, clean, bright, modern. Looked just like the pictures. 1 bedroom, a little kitchen, small bathroom, and a living area with a TV and a narrow window that overlooked a quiet street. It was on the 2nd floor of a brownstone-style building, and the host had left a small note on the kitchen counter with Wi-Fi info and a line that said, "Please do not try to open the locked closet near the bathroom. It holds extra supplies. Thanks." At first, I didn't think anything of it. Lots of rentals have owner-only closets. I didn't even glance at it that first night. I arrived late, made some tea, watched a bit of TV, then went to bed. The mattress was firm. The air smelled clean, faintly of lavender or some detergent. It felt like any other short-term rental. Familiar enough. Normal. The second night is when I started noticing it. I was brushing my teeth, and I heard something, not loud, just a faint, dull knock. 1 knock, then silence. It came from behind me. I paused, toothbrush still in my mouth, and glanced toward the hallway. The locked closet was about 4 feet from the bathroom door, just off to the side. I figured maybe something had shifted inside. Maybe a mop or a broom fell over. Or maybe one of the neighbors in the building was moving around. The walls were thin enough to hear muffled sounds through. Still, I stood there for a few seconds, listening. Nothing. I finished brushing, turned out the light, and went to bed. That night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to a soft sound again. It wasn't a bang or a thud, just a sort of shifting noise, like someone adjusting themselves in bed, or maybe stepping lightly on wood. But I live in apartments back home. I know the difference between upstairs noise and something closer. This wasn't coming from above me. It was in the apartment. More specifically, it seemed to come from the hallway. I sat up in bed and held my breath. No more sound came. I stayed still for a few minutes, listening. Eventually I got up, checked the front door, then slowly walked over to the closet. It was locked, like before. I tried the handle quietly. It didn't budge. There was no noise from inside. I stood there for a minute, then told myself I was being stupid. Maybe I was. The 3rd day, everything felt off. The apartment looked the same, still clean, still quiet, but I noticed something that stopped me cold. I was walking from the bathroom toward the kitchen and saw faint scuff marks on the tile floor in front of the closet. Pale gray marks, curved and thin, like from rubber soles. But they weren't from me. I always wore socks inside. They were fresh too. The kind of marks you see when someone moves back and forth over the same spot multiple times. I knelt down to look closer. Some of the marks curved slightly outward, toward the hallway, like the door had opened, maybe just a few inches, and then shut again. But I never heard it open. I never saw it move. That night, I stayed up. I sat on the couch with the lights dimmed, the TV off, everything quiet. I left my phone screen brightness low, so it wouldn't reflect much, and kept checking the time. Midnight passed. Then 1:30. At around 2:15 a.m., I was still awake, eyes heavy, when I saw it. The closet door moved. It wasn't dramatic, just a tiny shift, barely noticeable. But I saw the door edge move slightly outward, maybe half an inch, as if there was pressure from the inside. Like someone shifted their weight and bumped it. It didn't creak, didn't swing. Just that tiny movement. Then stillness. I froze. My hands went cold. I didn't get up. I didn't move. I just watched the door, barely blinking. My heart was hammering so loud in my chest that I could hear the blood in my ears. I waited. afraid even to breathe too loud. But nothing else happened. I reached for my phone and called the host. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I tried again. Same thing. I didn't wait any longer. I grabbed my bag from the bedroom, didn't bother folding clothes or packing carefully. I shoved things in, grabbed my charger, my keys, my laptop, and walked out. I didn't even lock the door behind me. I got into my rental car and drove. Didn't care where. I just kept going. I ended up booking a room at a motel about 40 minutes away. It was old and smelled like smoke, but I felt safer there than I had in that nice little apartment. I sat on the edge of the bed and kept thinking about that closet door, how it had moved, the way the scuff marks looked, the soft knock I'd heard. It all started to line up in my head, and none of it felt like coincidence. I didn't go back. I messaged the host in the morning and said there was something wrong with the apartment and I had to leave early. I didn't explain. I didn't want to. The host replied once, saying sorry to hear that. Let me know if I can help. And that was it. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Even after I got home, it stayed with me. That little door, the quiet sounds, the movement. A few days later, I got curious. I typed the apartment's address into Google just to see what would come up. I found a few real estate listings from years back. Apparently, the building used to be a duplex. That surprised me. The layout made sense. It was long and narrow, kind of like 2 units side by side at some point. One of the floor plans had a clear note. Shared access door between units can be sealed or removed. That closet? It was right where the connecting door used to be. Then I found an older Airbnb listing under a different host name. The photos were mostly the same. Same furniture, same rug, same layout. But this listing was about 2 years old. And there were reviews. Not many, just 5 or 6 before the listing was pulled. One review said, "Place is okay, but had a strange smell near the bathroom. Not bad, just weird." Another said, "Nice location, but I could hear breathing through the wall at night. Might have been neighbors, but it felt really close." That one stuck with me. I kept reading it over and over. Breathing through the wall. The listing had been removed 3 months before I stayed there. The new one had no mention of the old setup. The host had changed names too. Maybe a spouse, maybe a relative. I couldn't tell, but it was the same place. That's when I stopped looking. I didn't want to know more. I didn't call Airbnb. I didn't message the host again. I let it be. They removed the listing about a month after my stay. I kept checking. One day it was just gone. I still think about that closet sometimes. Someone could have been in there. Maybe still using the old connecting space. Maybe staying hidden. I don't know. I'll never know. But the noises were real. The movement was real. I saw it. I've stayed in dozens of Airbnbs since then. I always check the closets. Always. I booked a small Airbnb house in a quiet town in New Mexico. I was passing through for work and needed a place to stay for 5 nights. The house was listed as a cozy desert retreat and had decent reviews. It was cheap too, which made me a little cautious, but I figured maybe it was just off-season. The listing said, host lives on the property in a separate unit, but that wasn't unusual. I'd stayed at plenty of Airbnbs where the owner lived nearby, and it had never been a problem. When I pulled up, the place looked just like the photos. Flat-roofed, beige stucco walls, some cracked concrete steps, desert plants in pots. The yard was dry and bare except for a couple of chairs and an old grill. The guest house was behind the main house, a small, 1-bedroom setup with its own entrance. As I got my bags from the car, I noticed someone watching me from the front window of the main house. An older man, probably in his 60s, thin with sun-damaged skin and pale gray eyes. He didn't wave or smile, just stood there, staring, not even trying to hide it. I looked away and kept unpacking. Inside, the guest house was plain but clean. White walls, tiled floors, old furniture. The living room had a couch, coffee table, and a dusty TV. The kitchen was small with older appliances, but had everything I needed. There were no personal touches, no decorations, no pictures on the walls, just empty space. The bedroom had a queen bed with clean sheets, a wooden dresser, and a mirror that was slightly cracked in one corner. The bathroom was stocked with towels and cheap soap, and everything smelled faintly like bleach. I was tired from the drive, so I ate a sandwich, took a shower, and lay down. That's when I noticed the sound of footsteps above me. At first I thought I was imagining it, but they were real, slow, deliberate steps moving across the ceiling. The guest house was one story. There shouldn't have been anything above me. I got up, looked outside, and realized the roof was flat, no second floor. Nothing up there. I figured maybe it was just the building settling or some animal, though it sounded too heavy to be an animal. I tried to forget it and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to find the front door slightly open. I know for a fact I locked it the night before. I always double check. The deadbolt was still turned, but the door was cracked open a few inches. I stood there staring at it, heart racing, then slowly pushed it shut and locked it again. I checked all the windows. They were locked too. Nothing looked disturbed inside, and nothing was missing. Still, the air in the house felt different after that. Heavier. I went out to grab breakfast from a diner down the road. When I came back, I noticed the blinds in the main house had been pulled aside. That same man, tall, bony, same gray eyes, was watching me again. I pretended not to see him and went straight into the guest house. I didn't like that he never acknowledged me. Most hosts at least wave or say hello once. This guy just stared. That afternoon, I sat at the table trying to get some work done. I kept feeling like someone was outside the window. You know that weird sense you get when someone's watching? I finally stood up and yanked the curtain aside. No one there, just the yard and the quiet street. But when I looked down, I saw footprints in the dirt. Bare footprints right below the window. They were fresh. The toes had clearly sunk into the soft ground. I hadn't walked around barefoot, and I didn't see anyone out there. It unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. That night, I pushed a chair under the doorknob and kept the lights on. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a strange noise, soft clicking sounds. I sat up and realized it was coming from the kitchen. I crept out of bed, heart pounding, and looked around the corner. The light from the street lamp outside was coming through the window, just enough to make out shapes. I could see the back door was unlocked. I know I locked it earlier. Then I saw the doorknob slowly turning just a little, like someone was trying to test it quietly. I didn't move. I just stood frozen, barely breathing, until the turning stopped. I waited 5, maybe 10 more minutes, then stepped forward and locked it again. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I called Airbnb support and told them I wasn't comfortable. They offered to contact the host, but I said no. I didn't want to give him any reason to think I was reporting him. I decided I'd leave the next day, cut the stay short. That afternoon, I started packing some of my things. As I was zipping up my suitcase, I heard a soft knock on the wall. Not the door, the wall. I froze, then slowly walked toward the sound. Another knock, soft, like fingertips tapping wood. It was coming from the hallway closet. I opened it. It was just a broom, some cleaning supplies, nothing else. I stared at the wall behind it. It looked normal, but when I knocked on it myself, it sounded hollow. I pushed everything aside and noticed a faint line in the wall, like the outline of a panel. I pressed against it, and it gave slightly, just a fraction of an inch. There was something behind it. I stopped immediately. I didn't want to know what was back there. I repacked my bag faster than I ever have in my life. That evening, just before sunset, I went out to load my stuff into the car. As I was coming back for the last bag, I saw the man again, this time standing in the backyard. He hadn't been there 30 seconds ago, just standing by the edge of the wall, arms at his sides, staring at me. No expression on his face, just those cold gray eyes. I nodded slightly, pretending not to be scared, and went inside, locked the door, waited until it got dark, then kept all the lights off and peeked through the blinds. He was still out there, standing in the same spot. I left around 3 a.m. Didn't wait until morning. I took the back roads to avoid passing the main house directly and didn't stop driving until I was in another state. The next day, I messaged Airbnb and told them everything. They said they'd investigate and offered me a refund, but I never heard what came of it. I checked the listing a week later. It was gone. A few months later, I came across a news article someone shared online. An older man had been arrested in that same town for breaking into a tenant's unit on his property. Apparently, he had a long history of stalking and had several reports against him over the years, but nothing ever stuck. The article didn't say the address, but the photo of the house was the same. Same beige walls, same cracked concrete steps, same window I'd seen him behind. I still don't know what was behind that hollow panel in the closet, but I think about it sometimes. How the door kept unlocking, how he always seemed to be watching, how quiet his footsteps were. I think about what would have happened if I hadn't left early, and I wonder how many other guests left in the middle of the night like I did, without ever saying a word. I booked the condo in downtown Dallas for a 2-week work trip. It was a high-rise building, clean and modern, with big windows that looked out over the city. The listing mentioned it was secure, digital locks, surveillance cameras in the halls, and a front desk with a buzzer system that connected directly to an intercom in the kitchen. I liked that. It made me feel safe, especially since I'd be alone the whole time. The host was responsive when I booked. They gave me the keypad code and instructions on how to reach the unit. Everything went smoothly when I checked in. The building had a sleek lobby, a 24-hour security desk, and elevators that only worked with a key fob. The condo itself was spotless. White countertops, hardwood floors, a small balcony. It had a minimalist feel, like a hotel but more lived in. There was even a little welcome basket with some bottled water, snacks, and a handwritten note that said, "Enjoy your stay." I unpacked and got settled quickly. My routine was pretty simple. I worked from the dining table by day and watched TV at night. I wasn't going out much, just groceries, coffee runs, the occasional walk around the block. The condo was quiet. I rarely heard neighbors or anything from the hallway. It felt private. The first strange thing happened on my second night. I was watching a show around 11:30 p.m. when I heard the intercom buzz. It wasn't loud, just a sharp metallic ring followed by a soft hum. I walked over and checked the panel, but no one said anything. There was just static. I waited, thinking maybe someone from the front desk had buzzed me by mistake. After a few seconds, there was a faint click, like someone had hung up. I shrugged it off. Probably just a misdial. The next night, it happened again. Almost the exact same time, 11:30, maybe a few minutes later.
Buzz.
Static. Silence. Then the click. I remember standing in the kitchen staring at the panel, waiting for someone to say something. Nothing. Just that low white noise. It gave me a weird feeling, but I told myself it was just a neighbor hitting the wrong button. On the third night, it happened again. Same pattern.
Same time.
Same buzz. Same silence. This time, I didn't go to the panel. I just sat on the couch and listened. The sound was soft, but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. I let it ring out, waited for it to stop. Then came the static hum, then the click. I finally messaged the host. I told them someone kept buzzing my unit late at night, but never said anything. They responded quickly. It's probably someone pressing the wrong button.
It happens sometimes.
Just ignore it. That didn't sit right with me. The building was supposed to be secure, with a staffed front desk, who was buzzing the unit at the exact same time every night and never speaking. The next night, I couldn't sleep. I kept glancing at the clock as it crept toward midnight. I told myself I wouldn't react this time, wouldn't even move if it happened. But right on cue, 11:32, the intercom buzzed again. My heart was already racing. I got up, walked to the panel, and stared at it. I waited for the static to kick in. Then, for the first time, I answered. I pressed the button and said, "Hello." There was a pause. Not long, maybe 2 seconds. Then a voice came through, flat, male, low, no emotion. He said, "You're not her." I didn't say anything. I just stared at the panel. I could feel my body start to sweat. The voice didn't sound confused. It didn't sound like someone trying to find a friend or buzz the wrong unit. It sounded like he was sure. Then, same as before, there was a click. Quiet. Final. I stood there for a long time, still holding the button like I might hear something else. Nothing came through. Just silence. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with the lights on, phone in my hand, waiting for something else to happen. The intercom didn't buzz again. I kept checking the front door to make sure it was locked. I couldn't shake the sound of that voice. Not angry, not confused, just certain. Like he was looking for someone he'd already been watching. Around 6 a.m., I packed. I didn't even shower or eat. I just threw everything back in my bag and left. I didn't take the elevator. I took the stairs 13 floors down. I didn't want to be stuck in a small metal box if someone else got in. When I passed the front desk, the security guy barely looked up. I stopped and asked if they had buzzer logs, records of who had called up to the unit. He said, yeah, they keep a record, but only for entry attempts or calls placed through the front desk. The buzzer from the panel outside didn't leave a name or unit number, just a timestamp. I asked if he remembered anyone coming in around midnight. He just shrugged. Night staff changes at 10. You'd have to ask them. I didn't bother. I just wanted to get out. I flew home early. I didn't even stay the rest of the trip. The host messaged me the next day asking if everything was okay. I didn't answer. A few days later, I went back to the listing. I don't know why. I think I wanted to see if anyone else had mentioned anything similar. At first glance, everything looked normal. 5-star reviews, clean photos, glowing comments about the view and the quiet. But as I kept scrolling, I noticed one review that looked different. It was buried between 2 5-star posts. Short. No stars selected. Just text. It said, "Please tell future guests to disconnect the intercom. It keeps happening." That was it. No explanation. No response from a host. Just that sentence. I stared at it for a long time. I thought about that voice. The way he said it. "You're not her." Like he had expected someone else to answer. Like maybe she had, once. I've never booked a high-rise again. I booked the Airbnb because I needed to get away from the noise of everything, work, city, people. It was a small, one-bedroom cottage about 20 minutes outside a small town in northern Michigan. The listing described it as peaceful, private, and surrounded by nature. That's exactly what I wanted. No neighbors, no traffic, no distractions. Just me and my thoughts for a few days. The check-in instructions were simple. There was a lockbox under a fake rock near the front steps. I got there around 5 p.m., just as the sun was starting to dip behind the trees. The house was cute, wood paneling, big windows, and old metal chimneys sticking out of the roof. It looked like a place someone's grandparents might have built back in the 70s. Inside, it was clean but plain. There was a small kitchen with a microwave and an old fridge that made a humming sound. The living room had a couch that sagged a bit in the middle, a coffee table with a few outdated magazines, and a big sliding glass door that looked out into the woods. The bedroom was simple too, just a full-size bed, a wooden dresser, and a nightstand with a lamp. The bathroom was clean but smelled faintly of mildew, probably from the old shower curtain. There was no TV, which I expected. I brought a few books and downloaded some podcasts ahead of time. My phone had service, but just 1 or 2 bars. Enough to send a text, but not really enough to stream anything. The first evening was quiet. I heated up a frozen meal I brought with me, sat on the back porch for a while, and listened to the wind moving through the trees. I could hear birds, the occasional snap of a branch. Nothing else. It felt good to finally be somewhere still. After dinner, I read for a bit, then went to bed around 10. The bed was a little lumpy, but I slept okay. The next day, I took a walk around the property. There was a narrow path that ran behind the house and led deeper into the woods. I followed it for maybe 15 minutes before turning back. I didn't want to get lost, and I hadn't brought anything with me. No water, no flashlight. I spent most of the day writing and journaling, sitting on the porch or inside when it got too warm. I didn't see another person the whole time. No hikers, no cars passing by, nothing. That night, I went to bed a little later, around midnight. I'd been listening to a long podcast and lost track of time. When I turned off the lights, the house was pitch black. No streetlights, no glow from nearby houses, nothing. Just pure dark. I lay in bed listening to the sounds outside. It was mostly quiet, but every so often I'd hear rustling, maybe raccoons or deer. Normal stuff. Sometime around 2 or 3 a.m., I woke up suddenly. I didn't know why at first. I wasn't having a nightmare. I wasn't hot or cold. I just woke up. It was still completely dark, and the house was dead silent. I lay there for a minute, trying to figure out if I'd heard something in my sleep. I didn't hear anything right away, but I had that tight feeling in my chest, like my body sensed something even if my brain didn't yet. I turned my head toward the bedroom door. It was open. I'd left it that way. Through the doorway, I could see the living room, dimly lit by moonlight coming in through the glass door. That's when I noticed something. The curtain I'd drawn across the sliding door before bed, it was open now. Not all the way, but pulled aside just enough to see outside. I was sure I'd closed it. I remembered doing it. I stood up and walked slowly to the door. The room felt colder than before. I peeked outside, but couldn't see anything. Just trees and moonlight. I let the curtain fall shut again and locked the sliding door, even though I was sure I'd already locked it before. Then I checked the front door, still locked. I stood in the living room for a minute, just listening. I didn't hear anything at first, but then there was a sound, faint but distinct, like footsteps on gravel or dry leaves, coming from outside, circling the house. Not fast, not loud, just steady. 1 or 2 steps, then a pause, then more. I turned off all the lights and crouched down near the window. I didn't want to be seen from outside. I didn't see anyone through the window, but I kept hearing the sounds, footsteps, then silence. Then another step. Sometimes they were behind the house, sometimes in front. I couldn't tell if it was one person walking in circles or more than one moving slowly. It lasted maybe 10 minutes. Then it stopped. I stayed low and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Still no sound. I moved to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find from the drawer. My hands were shaking. I tried calling the host, but the call wouldn't go through. Not enough signal. I sent a text to my brother saying something fell off and dropped a pin of the location. I didn't get a reply. I sat in the dark living room, knife in my lap, phone in my hand. I kept thinking about what I'd do if someone tried to break in. There was no security system. No one close enough to hear me scream. I couldn't even call for help. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just sat there, waiting, listening. The footsteps never came back. No knocks. No windows breaking. Nothing. Just silence and time stretching out too long. When the sun finally came up, I stood and looked outside again. Everything looked normal. No signs of anyone. No footprints. Nothing disturbed. Just quiet woods and soft light. But then I walked around the outside of the house. On the back porch, near the sliding door, I noticed something strange. In the dirt near the edge of the deck, there were faint impressions. Not clear footprints, but marks. Like someone had been standing there, shifting their weight. Watching. There were more of them off to the side, near the edge of the trees. Same thing, shallow prints. Just enough to tell someone had been there. That was enough for me. I went inside, packed everything in 10 minutes, and got in my car. I didn't eat, didn't shower, didn't even look back at the house when I left. I just drove until I had signal, then pulled over and called my brother. He hadn't gotten my message. I called the Airbnb host too. Told them I was checking out early. I didn't say why. I didn't leave a review. I didn't want to think about it. And honestly, what would I even say? Nice cabin, quiet place. Someone walked around outside all night while I sat inside with a knife. It's been a few weeks now. I still don't know what happened. Maybe it was just a hunter or someone who got lost. Maybe it was nothing. But I know what I heard. And I know someone stood outside that house in the middle of the night, watching. They didn't break in. They didn't try the doors. They just wanted me to know they were out there. I booked the Airbnb cabin in northern Maine because I needed to get away from everything. No city noise, no notifications, no distractions. I was behind on my manuscript and figured a week alone in the woods would help me focus. The photos showed a small, boxy structure with bare drywall, exposed beams, concrete floors, and minimal furniture. There were no decorations, no fancy finishes, just a chair, a table, a bed frame with a mattress. It looked raw, stripped down, but I liked that. I thought it would help clear my head. The listing said it was perfect for writing and relaxation, and the host described it as intentionally minimalist with an unfinished aesthetic. I took that to mean it was a style choice. Something trendy. The price was low, and the reviews were sparse, only 3 of them. All from months ago, but they were positive, and I didn't think twice. I just booked it. The drive was long, over 5 hours from where I lived. As I got further into Maine, cell service dropped to nothing. The paved road narrowed, turned to gravel, then to dirt. Trees closed in on both sides of the road, like a tunnel. I passed maybe 2 other houses in the last half hour of the drive. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun was already low. Right away, I could tell something was off. It wasn't just designed to look unfinished. It actually was unfinished. There was no insulation in the walls. I could see exposed nails, electrical wiring, and open studs between sheets of drywall. Some parts of the drywall weren't even attached. They were just leaning against the frame. The windows had gaps around the edges, and none of them had curtains or blinds. The floor was raw concrete, still dusty in the corners. The front door stuck when I opened it, and there was no deadbolt, just a single turn lock. Inside, it smelled faintly of sawdust and cold air. The furniture was exactly like in the pictures, just the basics. A twin mattress on a metal frame, a folding chair, a camping table with scratches and marks on the surface. A single portable heater sat near the bed, the kind with a bright red heating coil that glowed when it was on. There were no rugs, no real kitchen, just a mini fridge and a microwave sitting on a plywood counter with no cabinets underneath. I stood in the middle of the room for a few minutes, just taking it in. I wasn't exactly thrilled, but I told myself I could deal with it. I'd driven all this way. I had food in a cooler and a few supplies. I didn't need luxury, just quiet. That first night was cold. The heater didn't do much against the drafts slipping through the window gaps. I wore 2 hoodies and pulled the blanket tight around me. I lay in bed and listened to the wind move through the trees. I heard a few soft thuds outside, branches falling, I assumed, or maybe a raccoon rummaging around. The place was remote, after all. But then I heard footsteps. Not fast, not erratic, just slow, deliberate, crunching over frost-hardened dirt and fallen leaves. I told myself it was wildlife, maybe a deer or a moose walking nearby. I didn't get up to check. I didn't want to open those flimsy curtains of imagination too wide. I stayed still until I fell asleep. The next day, I wrote for hours. The isolation helped. No distractions, no noise except for the occasional gust of wind against the walls. I made coffee, microwaved some canned food, walked a short trail near the edge of the property. I didn't see a single other person or even a car. No planes overhead. It was dead quiet. Peaceful, but in a way that started to feel unnatural. That night, the footsteps came back. It was later this time, maybe 2 a.m. I just turned off the heater to give it a break when I heard the crunch of something outside again. This time, slower, measured, closer to the cabin than the night before. I held my breath and sat up in bed, straining to hear. I couldn't tell where the footsteps were coming from exactly. It sounded like they circled the cabin. Then I heard a tap, a small, soft tap, right against the glass of the window near the table. Not like something falling, not like a branch brushing past. It was rhythmic, controlled, like a fingertip. I froze. I didn't get up. I didn't even reach for my phone. I had no service anyway. I just sat there in the dark, heart pounding. After a few seconds, I reached out and turned off the little lamp on the table beside the bed. I sat in total darkness. My eyes slowly adjusted, and I could see the faint shape of the window across the room. I watched it for what felt like an hour. Nothing moved. No more tapping. But then I heard the front door handle jiggle. It wasn't subtle. Someone turned it once, then again. then stopped. I stayed completely still. I didn't move a muscle. The door never opened. The sound stopped as suddenly as it started. After a few minutes, I got up and slid the small table in front of the door. Not that it would have stopped anyone, but it made me feel a little better. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of the cabin. The ground was frosted, and sure enough, there were footprints in the dirt leading from the edge of the trees to the window and around to the front door. Big ones. Size 12 or 13, maybe even larger. Way too big to be mine. I wear a 9. The boot prints were deep and fresh. They hadn't been there the day before. I was sure of that. Near the woodshed, I found 2 cigarette butts and a plastic snack wrapper, crumbled and tucked half under a pile of dead leaves. They looked new.
Clean.
The filter on one of the cigarettes was still white. I took pictures of everything, the prints, the trash, even the marks on the window where the tap might have happened. I thought about calling the host, but there was no signal. I drove a few miles out until I got a single bar and texted him. I told him someone had come by the cabin during the night, tried the door, and left trash behind. His response came a while later. One line. Asterisk, the contractor sometimes comes by without warning. Sorry about that. Asterisk. That was it. No explanation. No apology for the scare. No reassurance. Just a shrug. I didn't wait for another night. I packed up my things, threw everything into the car, and left by noon. 5 hours back on the road, and I didn't relax until I saw traffic again, until I passed a gas station and saw people. I never got a refund. The host stopped responding after that. The listing stayed up. Same photos, same description. Perfect for writing and relaxation. I checked the reviews again a few weeks later. One new one had been posted. It was vague, positive, said nothing about the state of the cabin. I don't know who was outside that night. Maybe it was the contractor, maybe not. But the way the footsteps moved, the timing, the cigarette butts, it didn't feel like someone checking in on the property. It felt like someone watching it. I still think about that moment, the sound of the door handle turning, twice, slow and quiet. Not knocking, not calling out, just testing. I still see that window in my head, the bare glass. No curtains, no privacy, just open to the dark. I booked the Airbnb because it was cheap and just far enough outside the city to be quiet. I'd been working too much, barely sleeping, and just needed a weekend alone to breathe. The listing said it was a small guest house behind the host's home, separated by a fence and a few trees. Looked clean, simple. It had decent reviews and no red flags. I didn't care much about luxury. I just wanted silence. I arrived Friday evening around 6. The sky was already turning that pale gray color it gets right before dusk. The house was in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy. The main house was old but well kept, with siding, porch light on. The guest house sat behind it, smaller than I expected, with one dim porch bulb above the door. The host wasn't there. They'd left a key in a lockbox. I followed the gravel path around the side of the house, dragging my weekend bag behind me. The guest house door opened into a small open room, kitchenette, table, couch, and a bed against the far wall. One window faced the backyard, mostly blocked by trees. The place smelled like fresh paint and a little like mothballs. Not bad, just unused. I didn't unpack much, just set my bag by the bed and made some tea with the electric kettle on the counter. I sat on the couch and scrolled for a while. No signal. The Wi-Fi worked, though it was spotty. Around 9 p.m., I lay down. I wasn't tired, but there wasn't much else to do. I planned to sleep in the next day and maybe read, maybe walk around if the weather held. It took a while to fall asleep. The place creaked a lot, normal old house sounds, I figured.
Pipes settling.
The walls were thin, and I could faintly hear something mechanical from the main house, maybe an HVAC unit. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and tried to ignore it. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. At first, I didn't know why. The room was dark, no nightlight, just a little amber glow from the porch bulb outside. My eyes adjusted. Nothing looked off. The kitchenette was the same. The window was still shut. I listened for a minute and figured it was just one of those times your brain wakes you for no reason. Then I heard it. A whisper. It was so quiet, I thought I imagined it. I held my breath. Nothing. Then, again, this time clearer. A short burst. Like a voice, but not talking to me. Not even loud enough to understand. I sat up. My heart thudded hard in my chest. I listened again. Nothing. Just that hum from the main house. I stayed still for another 5 minutes before laying back down. Told myself it was probably someone outside, maybe the neighbor's TV, maybe wind in the trees. I didn't hear it again, and eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I told myself it was just in my head. I made some coffee with the old drip machine on the counter and stood outside on the porch for a bit. There were trees along the back of the property, but no fence. I didn't see anyone. No dog walkers. No kids. Just still trees and the faint smell of wet grass. By noon, I decided to go into town. There wasn't much nearby, but I found a coffee shop with stronger Wi-Fi. I stayed for a few hours, reading, checking emails, wasting time. Around 4, I drove back. The sun was out. Everything looked normal. That night, I went to bed around the same time, 9 or 10. I left a lamp on, just a small one on the kitchen counter. I didn't want complete darkness again. I woke up just after 2 a.m. The whispering was louder this time. I didn't sit up. I just opened my eyes and stayed still. It was coming from the corner of the room. I couldn't tell what it was saying, but it wasn't just a sound. It had rhythm, like someone talking fast but soft. I looked toward the window, but the curtains were closed. The whisper stopped. I waited. Then it started again, this time from the other side, closer to the kitchenette. I sat up and turned on the lamp. The room looked the same. No one there. No movement. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. The porch was empty. Trees swayed lightly in the breeze. That was all. Still, the sound had been inside the room, not outside. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I lay awake with all the lights on, listening to every little creak and crack. By morning, I felt half dead. I made coffee, hands shaking. My brain tried to explain it away. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe a leak in the pipes. Something in the walls. But it hadn't felt like a dream. And it wasn't just once. I didn't want to stay another night. I opened the app to contact the host, but hesitated. What would I even say? Hey, I think your guest house is whispering at night? It sounded crazy. I checked out early listings nearby, but everything was either booked or too far away. I told myself I'd stay one more night. Sleep with earbuds in, lock the door tight, keep the lights on. Just get through it. That evening, I sat on the couch and watched something on my phone. The wind outside picked up a little. Rain was in the forecast, and around midnight, it started. Just a drizzle at first, then a slow, steady pattering on the roof. I fell asleep with my earbuds in and a podcast playing, but I still woke up, not to a whisper this time, but to a dragging sound, something like a slow pull across the floor. I froze. My ears were ringing from the sudden silence after the podcast cut out. I pulled the buds out and listened. Nothing. Then a whisper, closer than before, just to the right of the bed. I shot up and turned on the lamp. My pulse slammed against my ribs. The room was empty, but the air felt tight. My skin crawled like I was being watched. I backed toward the kitchenette and scanned every corner. Then I noticed something that made me stop cold. The rug near the couch had moved. Not a lot, just enough to see the edge of the floor beneath. I hadn't touched it since I arrived. It was small, but I would have noticed. I walked over and looked down. The floorboards didn't match up perfectly in that spot. One of them was slightly out of place, raised at one end like it had been lifted recently. I knelt down and pressed it. It didn't move. I looked closer and saw something even stranger, scratch marks along the edge of the floorboard, like someone had tried to pry it up with a tool. Old marks, but not ancient. The wood still looked raw. I stood back up. My chest felt tight. I grabbed my bag, keys, phone, charger. I didn't care how late it was or if it was raining. I was leaving. As I walked toward the door, something hit the floor behind me. A soft thud. I didn't turn around. I just unlocked the door, stepped out into the rain, and jogged to my car. I got in, locked the doors, and sat in the driveway for a minute, catching my breath. Then I backed out and drove. I ended up at a 24-hour diner 20 minutes away, sitting in a booth drinking watery coffee until the sun came up. I didn't go back. I didn't even leave a review. I just let the reservation run out and ignored the message the host sent the next day asking if everything was okay. A few weeks later, out of curiosity, I checked the listing again. It was gone. Not just unlisted gone. No trace. No reviews. No host profile. Nothing. I tried searching the address. There wasn't a lot online. Just one news article, buried a few pages deep. About 6 years ago, a man had been squatting in someone's crawl space in that neighborhood. No one knew he was there until the homeowner noticed food missing and weird sounds at night. When they finally found him, he'd been living under the floorboards for weeks, maybe longer. The article didn't say which house, but I remember the scratch marks on the wood, the rug, the whispering, the dragging. I don't know who was in that guest house with me, or under it, or how long they'd been there, but I haven't booked another Airbnb since. I booked an Airbnb in western Pennsylvania, near the edge of the Allegheny National Forest. It was a converted garage behind someone's house, standalone, small, basic. From the photos, it looked clean. The reviews were few, but mostly positive. It was cheap, and I needed to get away from everything. I'd been working nonstop for months and just wanted a break, somewhere quiet, not too far from nature. I arrived late afternoon. The driveway was gravel, and the main house sat up the hill a bit. The Airbnb was tucked behind a row of thick trees. No one greeted me, but that was fine. I'd chosen the self-check-in option for a reason. The unit itself was small but functional. There was a futon that folded out into a bed, a kitchenette, a small table, a bathroom tucked into the back corner. The windows had blinds, but they were thin, and one of them was crooked, leaving a small open gap that couldn't be closed fully. Still, it was quiet. No sounds but birds and wind. I settled in, unpacked a few things, and sat outside for a bit. There was a small concrete slab out front with 2 chairs. The woods were thick all around. You could barely see the main house through the trees. I didn't see or hear anyone else. That night, I made a simple dinner, read for a while, then went to bed around 10. It got cold fast. The little wall heater in the corner worked, but just barely. I piled on all the blankets I could find. Around midnight, I woke up shivering and turned the heater up higher. That's when I noticed it. The bathroom light was on. I was sure I'd turned it off. I always do. I have a habit of checking lights and locks before I sleep. But maybe I missed it. I got up, turned it off, and crawled back into bed. I told myself I was just tired. The next morning, I went for a walk down a nearby trail. There was a small hiking path listed on the Airbnb info sheet. It led through the woods and connected to a larger park trail system. I brought water and my phone, walked for about 2 hours, and came back feeling refreshed. When I returned, something felt different. The futon was folded back up. I had left it down. I was sure of it. I stood in the doorway for a minute, just staring at it. Then I went over to the door and checked the lock. It was still set from the inside. Deadbolt still latched. No sign of forced entry. I walked around the place, checking drawers and windows. Nothing seemed touched, but the futon was definitely not how I left it. That afternoon, I sat outside again, just thinking. I didn't feel scared, exactly. Just unsettled. Maybe the host had a spare key. Maybe they came in for some reason. But that didn't make sense. There was no reason to do that. And why fold the futon? That night, I put a chair in front of the door. It was the only door in or out. The windows were small and high up, not the kind you could really enter through. I didn't have anything to wedge the windows shut, but I pulled the blinds tight and kept my phone beside me. I had trouble sleeping. Every sound felt amplified. The wind, the creaking of the heater, a squirrel or something scratching at the wall outside. At one point, I thought I heard a soft knock, maybe from the bathroom wall, but it was faint. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, until I finally fell asleep sometime after 3 a.m. I woke up around 7. The chair was still in front of the door. The futon was still down, but the bathroom light was on again. I stood there, just staring at it. This time I knew I'd turned it off. I'd triple-checked everything before getting into bed. I opened the door slowly. Everything looked the same, but then I noticed something on the sink. A toothbrush. It wasn't mine. I hadn't brought one like that. It was blue with a rubber grip. I'd packed a white one from home. This one wasn't there before. I picked it up using a napkin and threw it in the trash. Then I sat at the table for a long time, just trying to figure out what to do. I could leave, but I'd paid for 3 nights. And it wasn't like I had proof of anything. If I complained, the host could just say I was imagining it. And maybe I was. Maybe I was overtired. I stayed, but I didn't leave the place that day. I kept the lights on. I sat near the door with my laptop, occasionally glancing out the windows. I couldn't see anything through the woods. No people. No movement. At one point, I thought I saw something, just a shape, through the trees near the host's house. But it could have been nothing. That night, I blocked the bathroom door with a table. Just shoved it up against it so it couldn't open easily. I didn't care if it was weird. I wanted to be sure. I slept with the lights on and the chair in front of the main door again. This time, I left my phone camera recording a video propped up on a book aimed toward the main room. I slept maybe 2 hours. When I woke up, the table had moved. Just a little. Not far. But it wasn't against the bathroom door anymore. It was off to the side. The bathroom light was on again. I grabbed my phone, heart pounding. The video was still recording. I stopped it and started to scroll through. Around 4:17 a.m., I saw it. The bathroom door opened, slowly. Then someone stepped out. He was tall,
Bite.
wearing dark clothes, moved quietly, carefully. He walked straight over to the futon, looked down at me sleeping, then walked over to the table, lifted it, moved it aside like it weighed nothing. Then he turned off the light in the main room. The camera didn't catch where he went next. I froze. I didn't move. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone screen, shaking. There was no second door, no back entrance. He had to have come in through the bathroom. I checked the room again, every inch of it. Behind the bathroom sink, behind the thin closet door, inside the cabinet beneath the kitchenette. Nothing. Then I saw it. A square panel behind the toilet. It looked like one of those maintenance access hatches. Not big. Maybe 2 feet by 2 feet. I hadn't noticed it before. I tapped it.
Hollow.
I grabbed the end of the toilet plunger and wedged it into the crack. After a few seconds of prying, it popped open. Behind it was a crawl space.
Dark. Deep.
Smelled like dirt and mold. I didn't look long. I closed it and backed away. I packed my stuff in 10 minutes flat. I didn't bother showering. I tossed everything into my bag, left the key on the counter, and got in my car. I didn't even text the host. I just drove. Once I had signal, I called Airbnb and reported the listing. I uploaded the video. I didn't hear back for a while, but a few weeks later I checked, and the listing was gone. I don't know who he was. I don't know if it was the host or someone else living on the property. But I do know this. Someone was using that crawl space, watching me,
Coming out when I slept.
and I still don't know how many nights he was doing it before I noticed. I booked a small studio Airbnb in Phoenix while I was apartment hunting. I didn't have a lot of money, and I needed something short-term while I looked for a real place to live. The listing looked clean and simple. White walls, a bed, a small kitchenette, a bathroom tucked to the side. The location was close to downtown, and there was self-check-in with a key padlock. That was a plus for me. I don't like awkward check-ins or small talk with hosts. I just wanted to be left alone to sleep, shower, and look for apartments. I got there in the afternoon. The sun was still high, and everything looked normal. The studio was exactly like the photos.
Tidy.
Smelled faintly of bleach and fabric softener. Towels folded on the bed. The kind of place that's been turned over so many times it doesn't feel like anyone's ever actually lived there, which is what I wanted. I unpacked my backpack, placed my laptop on the desk, and checked the Wi-Fi. It worked. The air conditioning was already running, which was a relief. Phoenix in July is brutal. The place had one window with blinds that rattled when the AC kicked on. Not much natural light, but I didn't care. I wasn't here for sightseeing. My first night was completely uneventful. I made some ramen on the stove, watched a few videos on my laptop, then passed out around midnight. I slept fine. No weird noises, no traffic sounds, just the low hum of the AC. The next day, I toured 2 apartments. One was too expensive. The other had a strange smell in the hallway, like old wet carpet. I grabbed lunch, got a coffee, and headed back to the Airbnb around 6. I took a quick shower and called it an early night. Around 1 a.m., I woke up. I don't know why exactly. There wasn't a loud noise or anything like that, but I was suddenly alert, like something had snapped me awake from inside my own head. I stayed still for a second, trying to figure out what was off. That's when I heard it. A soft, mechanical click. Not a knock. Not shuffling. Not creaking wood. It was the distinct sound of the keypad lock being used. The tiny, deliberate beep it made when someone pressed the code. Then another beep. Then a louder click. The sound of the deadbolt unlocking. I froze. I hadn't given the code to anyone. I hadn't even told my friends where I was staying, just that I was in Phoenix. My phone was on the nightstand, but I didn't reach for it yet. I was just listening, heart pounding, waiting for something else to happen. Maybe I imagined it. Then I heard the faintest sound of the door shifting, like it was pushed open just an inch. But by the time I sat up and grabbed my phone, I heard it again, the click of the door shutting. I rushed out of bed, turned on the light, and crept over to the front door. It was closed. I opened it and looked out into the hallway. No one was there, just silence. The hallway lights were dim and still, but there was a smell, faint and strange. A man's cologne, sharp and chemical, like something expensive, but overused. I stood there for a full minute, just looking back and forth down the hall. I listened for footsteps, for a door closing, anything, but it was dead quiet. I shut the door and locked it again. My hands were shaking. I messaged the host through the Airbnb app. I said something like, "Hey, just heard my door unlock and open. No one outside. Any idea what's going on?" They replied 10 minutes later. "Probably a glitch. The keypad's sensitive. Happens sometimes." That didn't sit right with me. First of all, the lock made those loud beeping noises. You'd have to type in the code slowly, and the final beep, when it unlocks, is unmistakable. I didn't accidentally brush it. I was asleep in bed. Someone used the code. I got a chair from the small desk and wedged it under the doorknob. It didn't feel like much, but it was the best I could do. I also slid my suitcase in front of the door as a backup. Then I turned on the lights and stayed up the rest of the night. I kept checking the hallway through the peephole every 20 minutes. Nothing. The sun finally came up around 5:30, and I started packing. I didn't want to spend another night there. I didn't even feel like showering or eating. I just wanted out. But I also wanted to be sure I wasn't being paranoid. That's when I remembered the small camera I had packed. It's not much. Just a cheap motion sensing cam I'd bought online a few months ago when I was dealing with a sketchy landlord in my last city. It uploads footage to a cloud account when it detects movement. I'd brought it with me just in case. I never really thought I'd use it, but I had set it up the first night, just out of habit. I stuck it behind a small plant on the kitchenette shelf. It was pointed at the front door. I checked the footage from the night before, but it only records when it detects motion, so I couldn't see what happened at 1 a.m. Still, I had an idea. Before I left the studio, I carefully cleaned everything up, made the bed, wiped down the counters. I didn't want any reason for the host to complain. But I also took one last step. I cut a single long hair from my head and taped it across the crack between the door and the frame. Just one strand, looped loosely with clear tape. Almost invisible unless you were looking for it. If someone opened the door again, the hair would fall. No way to put it back without noticing. Then I left. I walked to a nearby cafe about 2 blocks away. It had free Wi-Fi, and I ordered a coffee just so I could sit without being bothered. I logged into the camera feed from my phone and waited. About 2 hours later, a motion alert popped up. I clicked the thumbnail and watched. The host walked into the unit. Not a cleaner, not a repair guy. The host.
Same guy from the profile photo.
He wasn't wearing gloves or carrying tools. He walked in slowly, like he was looking for something. He didn't notice the camera. He walked over to the bed, pulled back the sheet, then opened the nightstand drawer. He looked in the bathroom, opened the undersink cabinet, then the drawers in the kitchenette. He wasn't cleaning. He wasn't fixing anything. He was searching. I watched him stand in the middle of the room for a second, then glance toward the door, toward where the hair had been taped. Then he left. I checked the footage again to be sure. He didn't take anything, but he was definitely inside. I switched apps and took screenshots. Then I sent everything to Airbnb, my messages, the video clip, the screenshots, even a photo of the broken hair on the floor just inside the door. They refunded me by the end of the day. No long back and forth. Just a simple message that the refund was issued. But that was it. No explanation. No update. A few days later, out of curiosity, I checked the listing again. It was still up. Same photos. Same host. Still taking bookings. No mention of the lock issue. No new reviews warning people. Nothing. I reported it again. Even messaged Airbnb to follow up. They said they'd investigate internally, but that was all. I didn't stay in Airbnbs after that. I booked a hotel for the rest of my stay in Phoenix. It cost more, but I didn't care. I just wanted a place where I could sleep without watching the door all night, where I didn't need to tape hairs across the frame to know if someone came in. I never found out what he was looking for. Maybe he does it with every guest. Maybe he thought I wouldn't notice, but I did. And now I check every lock, every door, and every camera angle every time I stay somewhere new.